right, good morning. Good morning to those of you that are not here to study the Middle Ages. So, first question, why do they call them the middle? What are they in the middle of?
History.
In the middle of history.
They're in the middle of a war?
There were a lot of wars. They were always in the middle of a war. You know, when you say something's the middle, it sort of insinuates that there's something on one side and something on the other that are important in some way.
Ancient times, present times.
Ancient times, present times. So, if you think about it, Greece and Rome, which is what this class studied last year and what we will study next year again, because we go back and forth. The wonders of Greece, right? And the Romans, and they took over the world, and it's all very important. The Middle Ages got named the Middle Ages by the people during the Enlightenment, like the early modern times. And they looked back and they said, yeah, that was not worth anything. That was just the middle. There's nothing good there. Because you probably know this, in the Renaissance, in the 1500s, 1600s, people rediscovered, sort of, the ancient world. They started finding manuscripts they hadn't found before, and people in the West started learning to speak Greek, and they started reading the Bible in Greek for the first time in 1,000 years in the West. And they dug up Greek statues and Roman statues, and they said, this is awesome. This was wonderful. Yeah, the stuff for the last 1,000 years, that was the middle. It's kind of insulting. So sometimes I like to call it medieval times, because Middle Ages just has, like, sometimes, I'm sorry if this is any of you, but sometimes the middle child, like if there are 3 children in your family and you're the middle child, it has a certain, like, you always get left out of things, you know, because the oldest gets to do things first, and then the baby of the family, oh, you're the baby, and then I'm in the middle.
I'm kind of in the middle.
Okay.
But there's 9 kids in my family, and
Okay.
I'm in the middle of the last group.
Okay.
And it's just the 3 youngest kids at home, so kind of a middle child.
So you're, maybe as people leave your family, your ranking alters depending on, like, if you're the oldest left behind in the family, or?
Well, there's the 3 oldest kids, and then there's the middle kids, and then there's the youngest kids, which is the group I'm a part of.
Okay. And you're in the middle of the youngest?
Yes.
Gotcha. But someday the person ahead of you will leave, and then you'll be the, you have that hope.
That's in a few
Holding.
years.
Okay. So what do you know about Greece and Rome? Like when I say, let's just talk about Rome. Tell me, we'll go around the table. What's the first word that comes in your head when I say Rome?
For some reason, disaster just popped up, but probably realistically conquering.
Conquering, okay. I'm sorry if somebody ahead of you steals your word.
Yeah, probably like a big war and like buildings on fire.
Wars and buildings on fire. Both of these are true. Yeah.
I think of like the emperor's names, like Nero and all the others.
And a lot of them were kind of jerks. Let's just
Especially
be honest.
Nero.
Especially Nero.
He murdered his own mother.
Oh, crazy man. And then Caligula, who's even worse if possible. And even after that, some of them were good. Some of the emperors were okay. But a lot of them weren't. And so, why was there not a Roman Empire anymore in the Middle Ages? You read about this a little bit. Why don't you get the reading questions out that I had you work on, which it's totally fine that you don't worry about it. And you don't have to go back and do them after today. And unless your mother told you in my opinion, you don't have to go back and do them. The first question I asked you is, what caused the downfall of Rome? What did Dorothy Mills have to say about that?
So, mainly German tribes, and then didn't other barbarian tribes slowly pick away?
Yeah.
Rome.
Is it, you agree?
Yeah.
You concur? So I brought for you, I'm sorry?
That was in my other history book that I had last year.
I brought for you a map. So I had you get 3-ring binders because I'm going to punch for you all your questions and things this year. For some reason, students bring 3-ring binders and then they just stick them all in the little pocket that's in the front.
It's easier than opening the binder.
Well, I've made it one step easier because before I wasn't even punching the hole. Like, go home. If you don't have a hole puncher, stick a pencil through. Like, we used to do when I was a kid. Anyway, but see, this is a reminder to you. And then when I say, oh, find your timeline, and then I always have to, I don't have one. It's in the papers. It's in the papers in your file. So anyway, here is a map of what happened to the Roman Empire. This is your very first handout of the year. So this is not going to show up very well on the, I have one for all of you. I will bring one or I will email it to you. No, it's just the 3 of you. I'm going to just bring it here. So this is where the Roman Empire used to be, right? This picture. It actually went a little bit farther over, not too much farther. There were guys here called the Parthians that were always just beating up on Roman troops, and Romans were beating on them, and they never could push very far. But basically, this is what used to be the Roman Empire. And you can see all the different shades, and we have the Visigoths, the Burgundians, the Franks, the Basques, the Ostrogoths, the Lombards, the Saxons, the Vandals. The Vandals are my personal favorite because, what do we call it? What is vandalism?
Well, there's a difference between graffiti and vandalism. Vandalism is like purposely defacing something.
What is the difference between graffiti and vandalism?
Well, vandalism is most of the time like bad and meant to like be rude or purposefully like bring people down or sometimes, but graffiti can be like art. Like on the side of buildings, sometimes you'll see like big portraits or other things.
I don't know. I tend to think of graffiti as also being vandalism, and like the murals being commissioned. We got stopped by a train this weekend. Really long train. One of those trains that stops over the intersection and then starts backing up. No. And there were all sorts of stuff scribbled on it, and some of it was kind of cool looking. But I thought, that doesn't belong to you. You shouldn't just draw on it. Anyway. And I got to thinking about vandals.
Drew on it.
Say that again.
Unless the person who owned it drew on it.
Yes. Then it's okay if it's your stuff. But I agree about the murals. They can be very gorgeous. I think it's funny, though, that this group of people 2,000 years ago, well, 1,500 years ago, have given their name to wrecking things in general. Because absolutely I agree with you. Generally, vandalism is nasty with bad intent and just messing things up. Also, not just graffiti, but like smashing windows and things like that. Which tells you something about the Vandals, doesn't it? If you give your name to a group of people that just wrecks things because they can, that's who you were. And so we had people, all these groups of people pushing. What do you think makes people, this is kind of a weird question, why do people move? Like, why were these people not happy, do you think, living where they were, and they decided to come here? And yeah, you know what? Yeah, you can just say it. You don't have to raise your hand if you want to.
Probably because it was okay at first, but eventually they started thinking that the Romans, like, they had better stuff, and they weren't happy with the stuff that they had anymore. So they're like, forget about what we have. We're gonna go take over this place and go get their stuff.
They had seriously nice stuff. There's also another companion problem. There were people behind them pushing on them. One of them is very famous, the Huns. We know about the Huns.
Mm-hmm.
Attila the Hun. So they moved in, and we say that the Roman Empire fell in 476 AD, which brings me, I see the holes. So you already did it. Good for you. I made timelines for you guys. So we have 2 pages of timeline. I hope I packed my bag correctly. And I have these for those of you who are missing today, and I will give them to you when you come to class. So there are 300 years on each page. So 400 to 700, 700 to 1100. So you get 2 of them. And I would like us to add our very first thing in our timelines for the year. And that's the fall of Rome. It's a good place to mark. It sort of marks the beginning of the Middle Ages, more or less. So you need the page, obviously, that's 400 to 700. And obviously, 476 is much closer to 400 than 700. So, like, maybe right around there. 476. Rome falls. Can you see that, Jack?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. Well. And along with that, after you guys write that down, the second question I asked you to look at in your reading was, what was the reaction? This wasn't even the final fall of Rome. This was when the Goths, which is another nice group of people, well, they weren't very nice, wandering through pillaging. They took over in 410. What was the reaction? Yeah, Jack, go ahead.
It was with horror and dismay.
Oh my gosh. It's okay, so you've got to remember that the Rome, 753 BC is the traditional date of the founding Rome. This had been going on for 1100 years. They hadn't had an enemy inside Rome since 396 BC. So like 800 years. No enemy had occupied Rome. I'm sorry, what were you going to say, Mariana?
I was gonna say it also kind of left them discouraged, and some of them like went back to their houses and like shut themselves up, trying to forget that it ever happened because they couldn't like believe that Rome was like under attack. Yes.
Dorothy Mills gives us the famous quote, Jerome, St. Jerome, who is known for, does anybody know what St. Jerome is known for? His claim to fame? He translated the Bible into Latin. The Vulgate Bible, we call it. St. Jerome wrote, "The city which had taken all the world was itself taken. The Roman world is falling." And when he says the Roman world is falling, it's kind of code for it's the end of the world. Because the Roman world meant the world. Right? If it was outside the borders of the Roman Empire, it didn't really matter. But then again, the world is coming to an end. That's what they felt. But you know what? We're going to spend this year talking about the Middle Ages. The world was not coming to an end. A lot of people thought it was the end of the world in the sense that Jesus is coming back. That this must be the end times. And of course, 1,500 years down the road, we know that it wasn't. But just get that into your system. Like, what? There are bad things happening now. But there have been bad things always happening. Do you know what I mean? There's always wars and earthquakes and famines and crazy groups of people taking over countries, like is happening in Afghanistan right now. But they felt like the world was falling. So one more thing. Look at that map again that I gave you. I want to note one more thing before we move on. Look off to the east, which is on the right side of your map. That big striped section that says Eastern Roman Empire. You see it's a very large section with the little, well, they're all striped. You know what I mean. the Eastern Empire didn't fall. There was another capital in Constantinople, and it didn't fall. In fact, it's going to go on for another 1,000 years. Another 1,000 years, till 1453. Actually, we're going to, I think it's next week's reading, we're going to be reading a little bit about that. It's in the next couple weeks. So, the next question I asked you on your list was, why did the church grow more powerful in the 4th and 5th centuries? Now, I don't want to, I apologize if this, what I'm about to do makes you feel like I'm treating you like you're 3. But you never know. What is the 4th century? What are the years?
Wait, isn't it just 400 years?
Isn't that just like 400 AD through like 500 AD?
Oh, see, I'm so glad I asked this question. Okay.
It's either 300 AD or 400.
Okay. 4th century is 300 to 399 AD. Okay, so for example, we're in the 21st century, right? We know this, and all our numbers start with 20. It's one less, and here's why. Because from 1 to 99, that's the 1st century, and then 100. Well, yeah. Well, but I don't want to put the 400. You know, I mean, yes, it is. Because if you count all of the year 300, if 300 was your year 1, 399 would be your year 100. But we can agree to disagree. It's okay. It's close. It's very close, even if it were only 99 years. So 100 to 199 is the 2nd century. So the 4th and 5th centuries are the 300s and the 400s. Okay, so just keep that in mind, because a lot of history books do that. And okay, if it makes you feel any better, I'm pretty fast at it, but I still have to momentarily, when it happened in the 15th century, okay, that's the 1400s. I have to just remind myself, the hundreds is one less than the century it is. Anyway, is that crazy? Back to my question. What happened to make the church so powerful in the 4th and 5th centuries?
Didn't the Roman leaders just all fall weak, so the bishops were the most powerful in the West?
Yeah, because there was no other power. Everybody was dead, or they were running away from Rome. There was a capital in Constantinople. At one point, the Roman emperors in the West moved the capital away from Rome. They went to a town slightly north in Italy called Ravenna, and they set up, you know about that, they set up a court there. Like, what? You're bailing on Rome? There was nobody left. And so you have all those people on the map crowding in. Who's going to take charge? You have people who are poor and needy. Go ahead. Go ahead. No.
Since I didn't have the book, I just looked it up on Google, and it said they also had a leader, the Pope, who was like a figurehead who was taking charge.
Yes.
Because they didn't have an emperor anymore.
Every town, very early in the church, every town developed, every area developed its own bishop. And because Rome was so very important in history, the Bishop of Rome was very, very important. And there was no one else. So when the famous story, when I think she tells it, when Attila the Hun comes, Pope Leo, the Bishop of Rome, goes out. He's the one who goes in and has a talk with him. And Attila turns around and leaves. And no one knows what he said or what happened, which is kind of cool. But there's no one else to take charge. So the church stepped in and filled. Have you ever heard the term a power vacuum? You know what a vacuum is, right? Not a vacuum cleaner, but a vacuum when there's no air, or all the air gets sucked out and it's a vacuum. A power vacuum is when all the power gets sucked out. There's no one in charge. And somebody who's smart, or somebody who's capable, sometimes somebody who's up to no good, not in this case, but sometimes it happens, steps in to fill the spot. And that's what the church did. That's what the bishops of Rome, the popes, did. They stepped up and took charge. And so you probably already know this. In the Middle Ages, in medieval times, we're going to be talking a lot about the church. The church was very, very important in people's daily lives. Unfortunately, in a way that it's not so much anymore for many of us. You know, we can kind of live our lives if the church didn't exist. Not really, but do you know what I mean? Because we have governments and everything that are independent of the church. And life would go on. I mean, my life, my eternal life, wasn't my life with the Lord, but you know what I mean, daily life for people. In the Middle Ages, it wouldn't have. If the church had collapsed, life would have come to a standstill. It was that important.
Also because during that time, the church said, like, oh, the only way to be safe when you die is to follow all our rules. We tell you what to do.
Well, you got to remember that that was the only church there was. Do you know what I mean? There weren't any other options. There was only one church. And it is true that you have to believe in the Lord Jesus, right? I mean, that is the only way. We just now, since the Reformation, we have lots of disagreements about certain things. But back then, that was the only option if you were a Christian, was the one church. Okay, so moving on. The next question I asked you, here, let me just take a look, because I have all these things highlighted. They're my things that I wanted to mention. But while we're still looking at our maps, I just want to mention one thing. Notice, can you guys find where France is today? You know where France is? It's totally fine if you don't know where France is. So, right, this
it's the kingdom of the Franks.
It's the kingdom of the Franks. So basically, France today is this. I should use just get my finger out. This area right here, kind of right across the channel from England, is France. But a big chunk of that, notice it's the kingdom of the Franks. This answers your question as to why that country's called France. The Franks. They were one of those crazy German tribes. Germans, even though they're French.
Wait,
it's very confusing.
They converted to Christianity.
They did, very early, which is, and by the way, I know that we're kind of like talking all over the map today, because this is sort of a review of how we got to where this history year starts. So do not be alarmed. Future lessons will be a little more targeted in their information than this kind of free-for-all. But yes, Mariana mentioned that maybe they came in because they liked what Rome had. One thing Rome had by this time was Christianity. So when they came, they learned Latin, and they took over the way the government was set up. But another thing they started doing was becoming Christians. And the Franks were early on Christianized. We'll talk more about that in later. Yeah, I'm going to skip over that. Let's move on to missionary work. Okay? How did Pope Gregory the Great become determined to send missionaries to England? What happened?
Well, one day he met what he thought they were slave boys when he saw them, and he talked to them, and they were angels, and they said they came from distant land of England, and then from then on he is determined that when he had the power to, he would send missionaries and stuff to help them.
Yes. This book got mentioned in your book, The Venerable Bede's Ecclesiastical History of the English People, which my high schoolers are made to read, but not this year. 2 years ago we read this. And here's the whole story. I love it. It's just because I love puns. You know how when you make a play on words. So yeah, he was walking to the slave market, who saw among other merchandise some boys exposed for sale. These had fair complexions, fine cut features, and beautiful hair. Looking at them with interest, he inquired from what country and what part of the world they came. They come from the island of Britain, he was told, where all the people have this appearance. He then asked whether the islanders were Christians or whether they were still ignorant heathens. They are pagans, he was informed. Alas, said Gregory, with a heartfelt sigh, how sad that such bright-faced folk are still in the grasp of the author of darkness, and that such graceful features conceal minds void of God's grace. What is the name of this race? They are called Angles, he was told. That is appropriate, he said, for they have angelic faces, a joke with angel, and it is right that they should become joint heirs with the angels in heaven. And what is the name of the province from which they have been brought? Deira. Deira was the answer. Good. They shall be rescued Deira, which means from anger, from wrath. They shall be rescued from wrath and called to the mercy of God. And what is the name of their king? Aieli, he was told. Then, said Gregory, making a play on the name, it is right that their land should echo the praise of God our Creator in the word Alleluia. I love it. I love this story. I don't know whether it really happened or not, but it's a really good story. So you said when he vowed when he had the chance, the opportunity, he would send missionaries to England, and he did get the chance because he got chosen to be Bishop of Rome. He got chosen to be Pope. And so he sent a man named Augustine. Sometimes people say Augustine, sometimes people. I just grew up saying Augustine, so I have to say Augustine for both of these people. This is a different, there's a famous St. Augustine that wrote all sorts of theology. This is a different one. Yeah, this is not Augustine of Hippo. This is a different one. And they sent this group of people to England, group of missionaries under Augustine, and you read in your book about how they were converted. At first, the first king he encountered, he's like, well, I don't know, but I'm not going to stop you from preaching. I don't know if I personally want to go for this, but I'm not going to stop you from preaching. And but eventually, England came over to become Christian. And this is actually, I hope that if you do it with me or someone else, I hope that you'll read this book someday. It's a story of the Christian church in England up until the year 700 or something, where thereabouts. I want to stop and talk about England. So not just England, well, there are little maps. England, what do we call the north of England? What's the northern part of this island called today? Do you know what's there?
It's not Ireland.
It's not Ireland. Which one is where's Ireland?
Oh, Ireland's the...
Ireland is the island over. So we have England, Ireland, and then there's another one. It's okay. Scotland. Scotland. Yeah. I'm sorry, I do not do accents. It's sad when I try. But back then, this had been a Roman province. Ireland never was, and Scotland never was. But up until about the slightly above the middle of the island, it had been Roman, and then when Rome fell and the Romans pulled out, there were some Christians there. But that island was invaded. It was invaded by those Angles. They weren't so angelic when they were invading the country. Christianity kind of collapsed at that point. But it was amazing. They were way out there, right? How are you going to travel in 500 AD? If you want to go somewhere, what are your travel choices?
A ship.
Ship?
Boat.
Yep.
Horse or walk.
Horse.
But it's over water.
Walk.
So.
Yeah. Most people, it's like some sort of animal you're going to ride, like a horse or a mule, a donkey, I don't know. Not an ostrich or something like that. It's not just any animal, but some rideable animal. And or walking. So you can imagine people, I'm imagining my map is here, okay? And people didn't get up that far very often. You had to sail out into the Atlantic Ocean around Spain if you wanted to. Hardly anybody did that because you don't know what's that direction. If a wind takes you, most people go to France and then, they walk across France or ride. This is me riding. And take a boat across. It takes effort. So they're kind of up there doing their own thing. And the church in England developed its own art and some of its own philosophies that didn't always agree with the church in Rome. They developed their own way. And I wanted to show you some things. I brought a couple of things. Let me find out where we... Oh, I'm just bringing it out. I'm going to do it in my own order. There was a little island off the coast of... I need to just... Okay. Thing number 2 you're going to learn about me. My drawing is really, really bad. And it's just sort of like, this is England now. This is England and Scotland. It's close enough, right? There's a little island out here, and it was called Iona. All right. Your book mentioned that. We're going to talk about Iona again. There was a man named St. Columba that founded monasteries there. And they were making copies of the Bible. By the way, if you wanted a book in 500 AD, how do you get a book?
You either pay an incredible amount of money.
Yes.
Or you steal it. Or
Don't steal.
No, yeah, no, I'm just joking. Or gosh, I don't really know. You make it write it. Yeah.
You borrow. Oh, I love that book. Can I borrow it and copy it? Not on a Xerox machine. Not on a printer. Copy it. Oh my goodness. Once I was going to do an experiment for myself. Maybe I still will someday. I was going to try to copy out the Bible to see how long it would take me. Like, how many hours would it take if you just had notebook paper and I'm not even making it pretty and fancy, okay? I'm just physically writing out a copy of the Bible. I'm just curious. If I did it for half an hour a day, how many years, because in monasteries, one of the things they were doing was copying manuscripts. Not just the Bible, but other books as well. And that would be their job, so they might do it 8, 10, 12 hours a day.
And I think I read about that. I can't remember where. But they would have to copy it exactly. If they made a mistake, they would trash it and start over.
Yes. So my son gets me interesting Christmas gifts. And a few years ago, he gave me this. This is not a complete reproduction, it's a book about a copy. This was just a Gospels. Often they didn't copy the whole Bible because it's long. All right? So sometimes they would just do a Gospels, often a Psalms. They would call a Psalter is the name they give to a book that just has the Psalms in it. So if you want to pray the Psalms or sing the Psalms. So this was just a Gospels book. And we don't have time to look at the whole thing, but it just blows me away. So here's a close-up of the writing. And they would draw inside the letters. I mean, massively draw. When I do my experiment, this is not happening. Okay, here's the first page. It says, details showing the letters P-I. Well, it's a row, but from X-R-I, abbreviation of the Greek monogram for the name of Christ. This is, look, and there's a guy in it. And then look at all the little swirls. kidding me? Painted in with pigment that you would have to ground yourself because you can't go to, like Hobby Lobby and get a tube of paint. You've got to make your own. Painting this in painstakingly, making these beautiful. Oh, here's a pretty, not too fancy page. The thing is a work of art. It's not just the Gospels. It is amazing. If you guys who are missing today, remind me, I will try to bring this book back. When you come back, say, we want to see the Book of Kells book. But the interesting thing is, they would, here, I'll just do this. Where are my glasses? I'm going to find a good example of this. Sometimes they would draw pictures that had to do with the text. So that one was like a snaky figure when it talks about Judas betraying Jesus. Oh, let's just look at this one. Look at the beginning page here. It's called the Book of Kells. It's in Ireland today. And one of my students went to Ireland a couple of years ago, and she actually saw the Book of Kells. So this is one thing that monasteries were doing. First of all, what is a monastery? Maybe we need to talk about that for a minute.
Isn't it the place with like monks and all that?
It is a place with monks. What do they do there, and why do they go there?
To like detach themselves from the world and just give themselves to God and like devote their lives, and like sometimes they don't ever speak again. That's like a commitment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like an intense place.
It is an intense place. What were you going to add, Jack?
No.
Is it good? So yes, people started, and I'm skipping around on our questions a little bit. I asked, the very last question I asked you was, what was the founder of the most widely followed rule of monasteries in the West? What did you put for that? You can tell me, Mariana. I see writing there.
The founder of the most widely followed rule of monasteries in the West. I think it was Saint Benedict.
It is. Saint Benedict is what I was going for. So let's just take a little side trail and talk about those monasteries for a minute. Let me make sure I'm not, I want to give half an hour to our writing. We got 20 more minutes. What happened to you, or what might happen to you in the first few hundred years after Jesus' death if you were a Christian? What was very likely possibly going to happen to you?
You'd be killed.
You'd be killed. It actually, they didn't persecute Christians all the time, the Roman Empire. It kind of came in spurts. And then there would be a lull.
Sometimes it would be the emperors who decided, like Nero, he tied Christians to stakes and then set them on fire.
He did, to make torches for his party, which is just, I have no words for that. Sometimes it was the emperor, sometimes it was local, like there would be a little outbreak. There were 4 or 5 famous Domitian, Diocletian. There's some well known for persecuting Christians, but it always was under the surface, even if there was a lull. Okay, somebody might get ticked off with you, your neighbor, and report you as a Christian. And maybe you'll just, I hate to say it like this, maybe you'll just be tortured. Like, oh, I was only tortured. But maybe you'll be tortured and executed. All right. But something happened in 313 AD. And it is that the man who took over the emperorship, named Constantine, made it legal to be a Christian. It's no longer against the law, which is awesome.
Didn't he try and force people to be Christian?
He did not. He allowed people to remain pagans. It was an emperor later named Theodosius, about 60, 80 years later, who made it illegal to be a pagan. I know, which is sort of like, what, do you not remember what it was like to be persecuted? But that's another story. So suddenly, if I'm a Christian, I'm not going to be executed for it. And this was nobody wants to be executed, pretty much. Nobody really wants to be tortured.
Other than crazy people.
Other than crazy people. However, so this is a good thing, but it also had an unexpected result. If you were a Christian before this, you said, I am a Christian. You may kill me for it, but I declare I am a Christian. What sorts of people, like what is the faith level and the belief level of the people who are doing that? Do they really believe it, or do they just sort of believe it? You may kill me for it.
Sometimes the emperor would be like, oh, if you say you're not a Christian, we'll let you go.
And many of them like, no, I won't. Some of them did. Some of them did say, oh, please let me go. But many of them didn't. These people were hardcore. You know what I mean? Like, when I join the church and I become a Christian, this may cost me my life. After this, not anymore. So, and not to mention, the emperor likes Christians. He's in favor of Christians. Can you see how I might be tempted to just sort of half-heartedly be a Christian? Just say I'm a Christian. I still do my own thing. I don't really believe it. But if it promotes me in the, because the emperor likes me better, if it gets me a job, sure, I'll say I'm a Christian. There were a lot of people who were sort of, I hate to say it like that, but I don't know how else to say it, not really very thoroughly Christian. Do you know what I mean? I don't mean to sound, I hope I'm making myself clear. So the church, the group of people who claim to be Christians, a lot of them get really sort of lukewarm about it. They're not really loving the Lord with their whole hearts. They're just sort of in it for show. And a lot of other Christians who were in it, not for show, said, you know what, there's no great feat that I can do for the Lord anymore. Once upon a time, I could go and get my head chopped off or be crucified for him. Or be tied to a pole and get torched, okay? But nobody's doing that to me anymore. So maybe there's another way to fully devote myself to him. And so groups of people started going out in the desert, started in Egypt. Egypt has a lot of desert. And living sometimes by themselves, sometimes little clusters and groups would form. One of the most famous of these is St. Anthony. And this idea of removing yourself from the world, sort of as they called it the white martyrdom. A martyr, what is a martyr?
Somebody who dies for Jesus.
Somebody who dies for Jesus. It actually means witness in Greek. You're witnessing to the truth of it. So sometimes back in the day, they used to even refer to just anybody who was put to torture, even if they weren't killed, as a martyr, because they witnessed to the truth, because they withstood it. So they started calling this, that was the red martyrdom because of blood, And this was the white martyrdom. We're going to just remove ourselves from society. And on one hand, that doesn't sound like a very good idea because we're supposed to be salt and light to the world. On the other hand, we mentioned this, we're circling back around to where we were before. What were these people doing in the monasteries? We mentioned?
Devoting themselves to God in extreme ways, so martyrs were probably making them more pure. That's why it's white.
Mm-hmm. So they were purifying themselves, but they were praying a lot. Who are they praying for?
For too.
Yeah.
Praying like for. They were praying for like everybody else.
They were praying for everybody else. You guys seem busy. I'm pretty busy. I don't pray 7 times a day. Any of you pray 7 times a day? Maybe you do the liturgy of the hours.
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't mean like, hopefully Lord help me. Lord, we're remembering whenever we're in, throughout the day. But I don't set aside time to shut out the world and just be with God. They did. They did it because I don't have time to. Doesn't mean we shouldn't pray every day. But they were also copying books. Guess what? They were also hospitals.
Weren't they also teachers?
They were teachers. They were in schools, exactly. They were hotels. It was awesome.
Sanctuary.
Sanctuary. Explain what that means.
Well, for like maybe refugees or other people who are like running from dictators or other people, I don't know.
Sometimes just your neighbors. Like if you were a suspected thief or a suspected murderer, you could run to the monastery or the church for sanctuary because they didn't have a trial system in place. You know what I mean? And it's quite possible that everybody thought you did it. They might just grab you and do you. And yes, exactly. And so you could run and say, no, I claim sanctuary. And it was considered very bad form to tear somebody away from the church, to punish them for something that maybe they did do it, but they went for sanctuary, presumably to be forgiven. Monasteries were so incredibly important. And so we're going to read a lot about monasteries and monks and how they moved and changed history. It's kind of funny that a group of people, male and female, monks and nuns, who withdraw from the world, actually change the world. They actually had a huge effect on history. But the monasteries up there in England and Ireland, huge effect. I think this was in your reading. I didn't ask you other questions. What famous young man was kidnapped and taken to Ireland?
St. Patrick.
St. Patrick. This was during this time period, around the year 400. Patrick was a young man. Do you guys know the story of St. Patrick?
Yes.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Can't remember.
I'll just run through it. St. Patrick, because St. Patrick's Day, right? March 17th, and we wear green. You should know something. He got kidnapped and taken as a slave to Ireland. And he was there, I don't know, 6 years, 8 years, something like that. And he heard a voice. He spent that time as a slave lamenting his lukewarm Christianity and repenting. And he heard a voice, like God spoke to him and said, "Get up and get ready, your ship is ready." And he ran off and he ran to the coast. At first the sailors didn't want to take him on, but then they did. Ended up in France for a while, but made it back to England. But couldn't be settled there. He couldn't feel comfortable. Well, I'm a Christian now and my family's Christian and we're all just hunky-dory. The Irish weren't Christian. And he decided he wanted to go be a missionary to the people who had enslaved him. And he went and he spent his life in Ireland teaching them about the Lord. The people who enslaved him. It's tremendous.
Like the exact people?
Well, I don't know if it was the exact people, but the nation, at any rate. That's a good question. I wonder if he encountered the exact people.
I think the king knew about him escaping.
Oh.
And so then when he went back, and the king was still there. But
That would be awkward and a little scary.
Yeah.
How long was he, like, back in England?
I don't remember. Jack, do you know?
Mm-hmm. Oh.
That is a good question, and I don't know the answer.
Long,
Like several years,
yeah, long enough
anyway.
to become a bishop.
Yes, yes. So, while we're talking about missionaries, let's go back up to that next to last question. I asked you about Saint Boniface. Not only were people missions going to England and then missions going to Ireland, but missions were going up to northern Europe. So, can I just borrow your map? So this area up here that had actually never been part of the Roman Empire. These were those nasty German tribes that the Roman legions were always fighting. Saint Boniface went from England to what we call northern Germany now, okay? And do you remember the story? What did he do to convince the Germans?
Yeah. Cut down the oak of Thor.
Yeah, he cut it down, and when he cut it down, it fell into 4 equal parts as if by the divine will.
I love it. I love it. So I got this tree, and it's my sacred tree. And Boniface says, well, you know, if it's God's tree, won't he defend it? If it's his holy tree, won't he defend it? Well, guess what? Nobody defended it. He just chopped it down.
Yeah, they were all waiting for him to get struck down.
Yeah. Like, ooh, this is going to be good. Thor's hammer and all that. No, it didn't happen. So this is the dawn of what we call the Middle Ages. This is what's going on. The Christian faith is spreading. People like Boniface and people like St. Patrick who are willing to go, many of them, and die to spread the gospel. We are also trying to pick up the pieces of the mess that used to be the Roman Empire. It mentioned in your Dorothy Mills book that the church took over a lot of the Roman organization, right? Because they were very organized people. They really knew. If they could have Romans could have, wasn't there like HGTV, like people help you organize your homes? Weren't there like television shows like that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
they can do that.
Yes, her name. I can't remember.
I don't know. You know what I mean.
There's like Mr. Kate and all that.
They're excellent organizers. In fact, the Roman Empire had been divided into smaller units. Each one was called a diocese. And today, the Roman Catholic Church is divided into dioceses. This area, I don't know. Where is Davenport where's your?
Our church is in Peoria, but we go to Sunday Mass in Davenport.
Oh, okay,
so
okay.
We kind of go to
so on the Illinois side, the diocese is centered in Peoria. I don't know what the limits are, but they adopted the system because it was a good system of division. So this is what we see at the dawn of the Middle Ages. I brought this picture. I'd like to bring some artwork. I mean, I brought the Book of Kells, but I brought this. This is a very early picture. It's in a mausoleum, which is like a tomb. And what is it a picture of?
A shepherd?
It is a shepherd.
Tending the sheep.
Tending the sheep. And I just want you to take a look at the shepherd's staff.
It's a cross.
It's a cross. Who do you think the shepherd is?
Jesus.
I am the good shepherd.
Jesus.
It also looks like the sun is like a crown.
Yes. He also has the beginnings of, you're probably familiar with this, the idea of a halo,
Yeah.
okay, of somebody showing particular holiness or sanctity in someone in the artwork. This is actually a mosaic.
Really?
What is a mosaic?
It's like, it could be pieces of colored tile or glass that are like all organized into shapes and like cemented in, like with
Yes.
maybe grout or something like it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a piece of artwork that looks like that in here.
I know. And so you think about it. You're working close up, but it has to make the picture when you step back, and you have to place the different colors. Patience level, I just can't even
You
imagine.
can see right here, these are like tiny circles.
Yes. You can kind of see the like pixels, for lack of a better, term, modern term. I'm going to see if I can,
Nope, there might be a piece.
this is working. This is working for you guys. This is our picture. I'm just gonna hold it here. I guess you can pause the video to take a look at that. So this is an example of early art. Since we're gonna travel through the Middle Ages and go into the Renaissance, when there's a sort of resurgence of different forms of art, I thought it would be good to periodically look at some art. We don't know who made this mosaic for all the work that was put into it, but this was a very popular picture. We find paintings like this in Christian tombs of Christ as the Good Shepherd. It had been even Roman and Greek authors had used this idea of shepherds, but when Jesus called himself the Good Shepherd, it took it to new heights. And so, so maybe not every week, but many weeks I'm going to try to bring some sort of artwork to set the stage. And this week's is the mosaic of the Good Shepherd.
Was there another piece of art on the back of that one?
There is. This is slightly later. You can probably tell this is Mary and Jesus. But this is...
He also has a son.
Yes, yes. This was like 700 years later. Like there's a big gap, so maybe I'll be bringing them back later. So every week, you guys probably already figured this out. Every week, I am going to give you reading questions for your Dorothy Mills book. Just chill. When your book comes, read it. If your book doesn't come this week, just come and no worries, all right? So your reading questions for next week, and I will be emailing, to those of you who are missing, I will be emailing you a copy of your reading questions so you can work on them. There's something on the back that we're going to talk about in a minute, but we're going to read chapter 3. So we're going to read this week. And it's a much shorter reading, by the way. I had you read, I don't know how many, 40, 50 some pages before class.
Yep, we read chapters 1, 2, and 9.
I'm going to try to keep it so that you read, usually somewhere between 15 and 30 pages out of this book, out of the Dorothy Mills book. And it has pictures, and it's not small type. It's not a crazy amount of reading. And so I would like you every week to bring your reading questions back. And here's what we're going to do. This is mostly for Addison, I guess, who's missing this week. You guys don't know. But I used to collect all your reading questions and go over them. But I have a lot of papers to read this year. And I just felt like you guys are perfectly capable of, when we go over the questions, if you left something important out, just make a note to yourself. All right, so we'll always go over the questions together in class, but I'm not going to collect them. Those are for your notebooks and for your mom to look over to make sure that you're doing them. Not that you would not do them. You would always do something like that. So we're going to read about, and don't put them away yet because there's something on the back that we're going to use. Okay? Actually, let's go ahead and do that now. Have any of you ever used the Institute for Excellence in Writing? Okay, awesome. You know what? I know Jack's background, but Mariana and Natalie, have you always been homeschooled?
Yes.
I started homeschooling in 3rd grade.
Okay, so a good long time. Because so many people, because of COVID and other things, a lot of people are just deciding to homeschool, and not that I just was curious. So this is Mrs. Ferguson's voodoo on the back with an X through it. Please ignore. I didn't want to waste the paper, but I accidentally printed out yet another copy of your reading questions that I didn't really need. This is the side we're going to use. I'm also going to email one of these to you guys. We are going to, for our first few writing assignments, we're going to retell a story.
I've done that.
Excellent. When you retell a story, well, let me ask you, when you retell a story, do you always retell it exactly the way it was told to you?
That's plagiarism.
Oh, okay. So yes. No, never write it exactly like copy. That is plagiarism. Okay, let me ask my question in a different way. Say you read a book and you want to tell your mom what the book was about. Will you tell it back in exactly the same words as the book?
No, that's why.
No.
That's why you read it out.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So you're gonna leave out some details, presumably, if you're retelling back a whole book. Even, let's use another example. A story like Little Red Riding Hood. We're all familiar with Little Red Riding Hood. Okay. Do you think everybody who tells the story of Little Red Riding Hood tells it with exactly the same words in the same way? No. Because there's tons, if you go to the library, there's a bunch of kids' books of different, like, fairy tales, and if it was the same words, it would be plagiarism, right? They can't just print the same book over and over, supposedly by different authors. You retell it in your own style, right? So, we're going to retell a story, but remember, you get to use your own style. If you leave a detail out, it's fine. What if, this is kind of a thorny question. What if you're retelling a story and there's a detail you don't know? For example, I'm going to tell you about Little Red Riding Hood, and I don't really know anything about where she lives. Right? We don't really hear, she just goes out with a basket, right, to her grandma's house. We don't really know anything about her home life. So maybe I decide she lives in Minnesota on a lake in the woods, because, the woods, the wolves. And they have, I don't know, blue siding on their house. Am I allowed to do that? Can I just make those things up?
It's not told in the story, so you can make up any
Sure.
detail you want.
It's not told in the story. I can make up any detail I want. You can too. All right. The only exception to this rule is when you are actually retelling something that you are presenting as historical fact. Okay?
When I did an assignment like this last year where I had to retell a story from the Bible, and I chose David and Goliath.
So you can't just suddenly have them living in California and being surfers. Like that would not be, why did I even pick that? I don't know. That would not be historically accurate. But if you wanted to embellish details like, what is David wearing? What is he feeling as he picks up the stones? Like you could embellish that. So the story we are going to retell is on the back of your chart. How do I not have one?
So for source story, I should just write.
Yes, and actually you can fill out that top if you want to. You don't have to. That is optional. But at the top where it says name, date, and source story, that is not necessary. But if you want to keep track of things more easily, you can fill that out.
What are we supposed to do?
Excellent question. And that's what we're going to do for the rest of the class period. Okay, so
Today's date?
in
17th.
how many lines does it give you? It gives you 4 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me just copy a little outline up here, so what you have. Okay, and let me just see, I'm going to just move this a little closer. This is going to, okay. Okay, here we go.
You might want to tilt it up a little bit.
I think you are right. What? Oh no, that's not. Okay, no. This actually will. Why does this not tilt? I don't know. I know that it's supposed to. Wait a minute. Do you have any ideas? As long as we don't break it, we're okay.
It might tilt up here.
No, I thought. Oh, you're so smart. All right. That's.
Yeah, that looks.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay. So you know what, you guys who are watching the video, I'm gonna say everything that I'm writing on the board. So, sorry, I should have gone away from the light. So the first thing we need to do is read our story, which I don't have a copy of. So, Natalie, will you just read the story? Just read it out loud.
When Patrick was traveling around Ireland, he came across two brothers whose father had died. Instead of being sad about their father's death, they were quarreling over which one of them should now own their father's farm and possessions. At first they shouted at each other, and next they started to fight with their fists. St. Patrick called out to them to stop fighting, but they were too angry to hear them. One of the brothers picked up a large rock, and St. Patrick feared they might kill each other. So he called out a prayer. Instantly both brothers were turned to stone. They could still hear and see, but they couldn't move. St. Patrick explained to them that it was wrong for the brothers to fight. And when he turned them back into men, they were so amazed that they settled their differences and were friends forevermore.
Okay, this is a very strange story. Something about...
Is this real?
Okay, that is exactly, just so you can hear, Natalie asked, is this real? I don't know.
So it's a myth.
Okay, yes, it's a myth in the sense that, okay, so sometimes we use myths in two ways. Myth can sometimes be code for not really true.
Like Atlantis.
Yeah. Or myth can mean tells you a higher truth, reveals a truth about things. There are many very amazing stories told about saints, especially in the early Middle Ages, okay? And I do not know if they really historically happened. I don't know that they didn't, because
they could be parables.
They could be parables, but think about, I mean, Peter raised someone from the dead. They used to take handkerchiefs, it says in the book of Acts, from Peter, I think, like a piece of cloth, to bring and make sick people well. It tells us that in the book of Acts. All right? We all agree that the book of Acts is historically true. Like, these things really happened. Ananias and Sapphira fell down dead because they lied to the Holy Spirit about how much money they made. So I don't know. Can God turn people to stone and then turn them back again? Of course he can. He can do anything. He can step into history, he can step into the universe, and he can create miracles. Does he all the time? No. So, but it tells us something about St. Patrick's ministry. So I don't know. This is going to fall into the category of you are allowed to embellish this story. Okay? Because I don't know that this is, I don't know. This is just a story they tell about St. Patrick. We're going to actually have some more of these stories. Some of them are stories of something that really happened about the saints, and some of them are not. But since we talked about St. Patrick today, I thought we'd use this story. So here you can see that your outline is divided into three parts. And you see off to the left, by the first paragraph it says character, setting. Who? What are they like? What's the situation? When and where did this happen? What is the image that it brings to your mind? What's the mood? Is this going to be a funny story? Is this sad? It was a dark and stormy night, and the trees were creaking, and you know it's going to be a creepy story, right? That's the mood. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to jot down a few notes to ourselves to answer these questions. The easiest question to answer is, who is in this story? Tell me somebody who's in this story.
St. Patrick.
St. Patrick. Let's put him up here. And what we're going to try to do is limit ourselves to 3 words. Like we're not going to write out, St. Patrick was walking along one day. Don't tell the whole story here. That's what your assignment's going to be. We're just making notes to ourselves to jog our memory. Like, oh, I read that story, say it's 2 days from now, and you're retelling the story. I read that story a couple days ago, don't really remember. And like, oh, I wrote down notes to myself. This will help me remember. Who else is in this story?
Read the story.
Well, yes, but we're not gonna. No, if you forget, totally forget something. But if our outline's good enough, we don't have to reread the story. Who else is in this story?
The 2 brothers.
2 brothers. Okay, so I'm going to just write, because I'm lazy, and I'm just going to write the number 2 because I can. So go ahead and write this down. Copy this down with me. 2 brothers, and what are the 2 brothers doing?
Fighting.
Fighting. 2 brothers, and they're fighting. I'm going to put that down. Did it tell us why they were fighting? I've already forgotten.
It told us they were fighting. Their dad had just died, and they were fighting over which one of them would get the money in his farm.
So could we say both want inheritance? Yeah, you can put possessions. I'm going to put inheritance because that kind of wraps up. Can you see this fine, Jack?
Yeah.
Okay. What was St. Patrick doing? Did it say?
He was traveling.
He was traveling. So I'm just going to add traveling at the top. Also, off to the left, our little prompts. It says when and where. Does this story tell us when and where? No, we're in Ireland. Okay, in Ireland, they're in Ireland, and what kind of day is it? If it doesn't say, let's decide. Is it
scorching hot?
It's scorching. It's scorching hot. I love it. You know, because this makes sense to me, because you know how when it gets really hot, people just get angry. Do you ever feel like I'm hot and humid and I'm just angry at everything? Maybe you get older. When you're young, you're just like, yay, it's hot. Let's go swimming. And I'm like, oh, yes. See, you're a young woman after my own heart. It's hot. Let's stay inside. It's my philosophy. So they're in Ireland, it's scorching hot, and here's something. So what are the surroundings? Are they in a road or are they in a field? Where would you like them to be?
I would expect him to be in
on a bridge.
Oh, so he can't get past until he deals with them. I kind of like this. Okay, you can fill this in with whatever you want. I'm going to say on a bridge, over. Obviously, it's over a river.
Over the Mississippi River.
We have to look up a river in Ireland. A bridge. I don't say over a river because what else would it be over? Well, it could be over a canyon. Pond. It could be over a canyon. Sometimes there are bridges with no water underneath.
Oh, I do.
Some canyons have rivers.
This is true. A bridge, and underneath the river is
it's a dried up stream.
The river is boiling because it's so hot. No, okay. That's very silly. You may make them be wherever you want the surroundings to be. This is not told to us in the story, so this is where you get to embellish. Okay? So these are our notes to ourselves to remind us, okay, what is this story? Oh yeah, it's the one where St. Patrick is traveling and he meets two brothers fighting. They both want the inheritance. They're all in Ireland. It's scorching hot, so hot that the river under the bridge is boiling. Little fish are fanning themselves.
Yeah, no.
If someone was fishing, the fish would already be cooked.
Awesome.
It's like someone could throw potatoes
like a
and
fish
then
boil.
Potatoes and then you mash them
Fish
up.
soup.
And then you can make
okay. So as you can see, you can get a little crazy with these stories, and it's okay. And I have a lot of these stories to read when you write them because I have other kids on Wednesday, and so it makes it fun for me.
There is a boiling river in the Amazon.
Wait, really?
Yeah. It's like 200 plus degrees.
Maybe it was just, maybe it's like a hot spring underneath. Okay. All right. Whatever. Okay, paragraph number 2. This is where we have a conflict or a problem. Okay, we already wrote the conflict, didn't we? So I'm gonna address that in a minute. But let me remind you of something. What if I told you a story and it went like this? Susie got up one morning and it was a perfect morning. It was like 71.3 degrees and the sun was shining and the birds were singing and she went downstairs and it was her favorite breakfast of blueberry waffles and sausage links and cinnamon rolls. Oh, that would be a really... Shouldn't eat waffles and cinnamon rolls. Okay, Susie's problem. Susie's going to have her cholesterol checked later, but that's not our problem. Okay, and then she went outside, and all her friends were there, and they had a picnic in the park, and it was perfect. There were no ants, there were no flies or mosquitoes, and they played, and it was just perfect. And they went home, and she had pizza for supper, and she loves pizza. And then she went to bed, and the sheets were all freshly washed, and they had a nice smell, and they were all soft, and she had her favorite toy next to her, and she went to sleep at the end. Is this an interesting story?
Yeah,
it
kind
sounds
of.
very relaxing.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's kind of.
It's a little boring.
It's just something that goes on in someone's daily life.
Okay, so I guess I have screwed up the fact that my point I was gearing towards is stories really get only interesting when there's some sort of conflict. Okay, you can dispute that. You can dispute that. Like if everything went perfectly, think of a book or a movie with no problems.
That is fairly inaccurate because there are always problems.
There are always problems. First of all, because there are always problems in real life. I mean, life.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you might have a perfect day here and there. You know what I mean? But they don't make very good stories.
You'll never have a perfect day with siblings.
Wow, that is very pessimistic.
Yeah. So I would agree.
But probably accurate. You could probably fill in for siblings any other human beings around you because other human beings are annoying. Let's just admit it. Like other human beings can annoy us. And then we have to learn to be patient, which is a good thing for us. Okay, anyway, so our story has a conflict. Now, Natalie brought up, I inadvertently put the conflict in. So now I'm going to embellish the conflict. I'm going to say, I don't know what it says in our story, but the brothers, this conflict has escalated to what are they doing now?
They're fighting.
Shouting and fighting.
Fist fight. The brothers are having a fist fight. They are shouting.
But they're actually brothers from a monastery that died, so that's not really the place.
They're screaming. They are trying to
throw rocks at each other.
Okay, throw rocks. Let's just go crazy on the conflict. Push each other into the boiling river. That would be unfortunate. What do they think? Okay, so notice what I'm doing. I'm kind of at a stopping place, so I'm looking at my little questions, and it says, what do they want or need, think, say, or do? This is to get me. So we know what they're doing and what they're saying.
At the want, I just put dead father's possessions.
Okay.
Because that is just like, is there a dead father?
And they're saying dad's stuff
is mine.
All right.
You know, the episode was essentially this was in. So it's actually like just happened a couple days ago. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, it could be.
It's
And the sad thing is, this does. I don't know if there's throwing rocks and screaming, but people fight over inheritances all the time.
That's
like
why
this
people
happens.
need wills.
That's why we need wills, and sometimes the wills get contested, and they still fight. People. See, I told you people were annoying, right?
People make crazy wills, and they're like, oh, if you do this, you get the.
Oh, but if you're in your right mind, you're allowed to do that. Oh, I should do that. I should put that in my will. You get my stuff if you stand on your head for 30 minutes and just because I could make them. No, by the way, I will not do that to my children. Just want to make that perfectly clear for posterity.
I feel like it's just unfair if they do like athletic challenges because your child could be more athletically
This is
inclined.
true. I'm picturing my own children, and I know who would win and who would lose. Again, don't tell my children. Okay, so notice I'm just using my imagination to embellish. Okay, and I'm asking myself those questions. What do they want, need, think, say, or do? Okay, so we see our last paragraph, and this is what happens in a story, right? Either a long story or like a book length or a short story. We meet the people and find out where they are, where they live. We meet a problem. And then the problem comes to some sort of solution. It's a very unsatisfying story. I watched a movie last night with my husband and it really stunk. And partly because it was an unsatisfactory resolution, we will say. Okay? They didn't, it left me with a bunch of questions. But but isn't that guy still going to be a jerk and he's going to beat up him? And this is what I was left thinking. So every story, for some reason the Disney movie Hercules is, we meet Hercules and then he wants to know how to become a hero. He spends his time trying to become a hero. That's his conflict. And the resolution is he finds out that self-sacrifice is the true path to heroism.
And then he turns down immortality for an egg.
And then he turns, which is nothing to do with the actual Greek story of Hercules. Well, very little to do, just to let you know. Little bit. This much. But it's an awesome movie anyway. Okay, so our third paragraph, our resolution, off to the left, it says, how is it solved? Is there a moral or a message? And is there an epilogue, like a, and they live, a denouement means something to bring us back down to reality, like a finish. So what how did he turn them to stone? Did he just speak?
He prayed.
Okay, pray. Saint Patrick prays. Or prayed.
Maybe he just used Medusa.
Yeah.
Okay, so, all right, before I tell the joke. Okay, we have time. So, I saw this online, and it was a cartoon, and it said something about bad blind dates, or when blind dates go bad, and just blind date is when you go out with a member of the opposite sex, but you've never met before. Somebody sets you up. So you've never actually met them, and you meet at a restaurant to see if you like each other, okay? Yes. And so, and it took me a while to get it, because on one side was St. Patrick, and on the other side was this lady, and she was bald, and it said St. Patrick and Medusa. Okay, so if you know anything about Medusa, do you know what her hair is made of? Snakes. And so there's a story that St. Patrick drove all the snakes out of Ireland. So the joke is that he met Medusa and he drove all the snakes off her head, and then she was bald. Okay, Natalie is just not like, yeah, I'll humor her, but I'm not.
I know there's a Greek story. It's like the goddess of wisdom, something
Athena.
like that. Yeah, Athena.
Yes.
Medusa used to be like a goddess, and Athena turned her into like a hideous creature.
Yes.
With a stake.
It's
Very good.
because,
Indeed.
Medusa used to be a beautiful woman. I don't know. She might have been like magical or something. But then her and Poseidon were like caught hooking up
Oh,
in Medusa
I know.
in
The gods
Athena's
do
temple,
that.
and it was like disrespectful. So she turned Athena turned Medusa into what she.
A hideous beast.
She
Very
couldn't really
good.
do anything with
Excellent.
Poseidon.
Okay, that's nothing to do with, but that was a nice review of Greek mythology. Okay, St. Patrick prays, and what happens?
They get
They
turned
turn
to
stone.
stone.
Brothers become stone. And what do the brothers think when they become stone? It says they can still think.
They
I
think
would
about them
what
being
the
stones.
heck?
Yeah, what the heck?
I'm like, once I turn back, I'm gonna throw my brother at this guy.
They think,
He's stone.
who is this guy? I don't know. I'm just making things up. You can write whatever you want to there. What does St. Patrick do after they're turned stone?
He talks and he like reasons with them.
Okay.
He explains why it's wrong for brothers to fight.
Explains, I'm going to limit myself to 3 words. Explains, wrong, fight. I think I would understand what that means, right? Explains it's wrong to fight. I don't have to, let's be as lazy as we can. If we can get it in 3 words, let's do 3 words. Why write extra is? We don't have to. And then they are,
They were so many. He explains why it's wrong for them to fight. He turns them back to men, and they were amazed
okay.
that they what? Why were they so amazed with that they set up their differences?
Well, because, if he can turn them into stone, what's he going to turn them into next time? Maybe he'll turn them into stone and they'll stay that way. It would be a bummer to be a stone forever. And the thinking, how would you like to be a stone but you could still think? It's so boring.
You could live forever.
Yeah, but would you want to?
Well, you
I'm
know.
a stone!
A little bit.
Wait, can you talk?
No, you're a stone!
You can-
How many stones
You can
talk?
hear and see.
Well, technically it's the
I mean, if you can think.
statues.
No, you got no mouth.
If you can think, that'd be fine. I'm fine
No, no.
with that. I only use my mind.
Okay, we can agree to disagree.
And
Yeah.
if you were a copper statue, eventually over the years, if you mixed with like air molecules and water molecules enough,
Oxidized.
then yeah, you would turn bluish green like the statue.
Oh, it'd be embarrassing. Okay, so I'm going to wrap this up. They become men and friends.
Become manly friends.
Well, they become men again. They become or is it men? You could unrocked. They become unrocked. I don't know if that is a
I
word.
didn't
I'm pretty
have
sure
like
it's not.
a section where they said anything, so I just put turn them back to men.
So I want to just reiterate something. This is an example. The idea, talk about the assignment. The idea is this week I would like you to sit down with your outline and rewrite this story.
Can you just like write it right there?
Well, but no, I want you to put that away because the idea is we could start to do this for longer and longer and longer. Like it could be a whole book. We could do The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe like this. Well, you don't want to reread The Lion, the Witch. I mean, I do want to reread The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But you know what I mean? Just to retell. So this is to get used to take details out of a longer story. I know this is a short story, but to get the idea. Because everything ought to
How
be
long
there.
are we supposed to do this? Multiple paragraphs?
It will be
Or-
3 paragraphs. These are paragraphs.
Alright.
Paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3. And just use these. So if I rewrote it, say, one day St. Patrick, here's also an example. I can mix up the notes. One day St. Patrick was traveling through Ireland. It was a scorching hot day. He came to a bridge under which the river was boiling under the excessive heat for Ireland during this time of year. On the bridge, there were 2 brothers who were fighting furiously. Each one wanted the inheritance left by their father. All right? The brothers, this is paragraph 2, the brothers began a knockdown, drag-out fist fight. One of them had a bloody nose and the other one had a black eye. I'm adding. The shouting and screaming echoed off the rocks for miles around. They threw rocks at each other, and each one inched closer, trying to push the other into the boiling hot river. And as they fought, with every breath, and before they threw every punch, they screamed, "Dad's stuff is mine!" Okay, that's my second paragraph. You get the idea. And then do the same thing with the third paragraph. That's all I want. And I want you to bring it back to me next time. And if you can write it, the goal is don't reread the story. Just use this. Notice how when I retold it, I embellished with stuff I didn't even write down. Totally cool with that. Use your imagination. But this is our main outline. 3 paragraphs. The setting and characters, the problem, and the solution. You look like you have a question.
Do we get grades?
I'm not giving you grades. However, I will go over, your parents can give you grades if they want, but I'm going to go over every paper. I'm going to correct grammar. I'm going to give you hints. I'm going to try to always find something we can do better, because here's the thing, everybody can do better. Like even published authors can do better. So it's not a criticism. It's, hey, together, let's always get better and better. I look at stuff I wrote 5 years ago, and I think, yeah, I wouldn't do it that way today. Let's always get better, okay? So I'm not going to put a grade on the top, but there's going to be feedback, notes and feedback, yes, so that hopefully we can use that next time. Okay, one last thing. This week you're going to read your Dorothy Mills reading. Notice at the top of the reading questions, it says we're reading chapter 3. We are reading about the Eastern Empire. You're also going to start reading a book called The Arabian Nights. Are you familiar with the Arabian Nights?
Only from Latin.
Only from Latin.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Which is one of the Arabian Nights stories. So, does your book look like this? You don't have yours yet, Natalie.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to note something. Okay, in the beginning, and if your book comes, Natalie, there's a preface. You don't have to read the preface, unless you just really, really want to. Okay. But there is a place called Introduction. This is the beginning of the book. This isn't like an introduction by the author or something. This is where the book starts. Introduction. Okay? Because this tells you important stuff you need to know. This is actually where the story begins. All right? Yes?
Do you want us to read it this week?
Yes. And you are going to read, you might want to write this down. Let me give you the... Okay, so I want you to read, if your book looks like that, it's pages 15 through 109. And it's from the introduction all the way through the story of the third calendar. Right? And it looks like a lot of pages, but it's really like there's some pictures in here, and there's blank pages where the story ends, and it's really, and you will find that it reads very quick and fast. All right, can you see that well enough, Jack?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, Natalie.
Hmm?
Oh, I'm sorry. So you're going to find this out in the introduction, but I can't help but tell you. Okay. Oh, shoot, we went over. But we're fine. Jack, you're next for Latin, and we'll be fine. Once upon a time, there was a king, and his wife cheated on him. And it made him hate women so much. He had her executed, and he decided to marry a new wife every night and kill her in the morning. By the way, this happened in the East. These are stories collected from Muslim countries. We're going to be talking about Islam in Persia. Okay, these are Eastern stories. And you know this, Aladdin. Okay, and so a young girl named Scheherazade said, "Let me marry him." And her dad's like, "You're nuts. You're going to get killed in the morning." No, I've got a plan. Her plan is, I start a story every night, and I leave off at a cliffhanger moment. And then he wants me to stay alive so I can finish the story the next night. And I do, but then I start a new story, and I leave off at a cliffhanger moment. And these stories from Persia became collected as the 1001 Nights, or the Arabian Nights. There's 1001 tales. We do not have 1001 tales in our book. Okay, we're not reading all 1001 tales. But he did not. Oh, I just gave you the. You probably knew that anyway. So in Aladdin, when the genie sings, well, Ali Baba had them 40 thieves, Scheherazade had 1,000 tales. Those are the first two lines. So you ain't never had a friend like me. Scheherazade had 1,000 tales. It's this book. Okay? Enjoy. They're very weird. I think they're hilarious. So you're going to write. You're going to read Dorothy Mills chapter 3. And you're going to read this section from the Arabian Nights. And you're going to come back, but not here next week. It'll be in Moline. But your parents know that. Okay? And bye to you. I will see you hopefully soon. I'm turning this off. And